The 2022 NBA playoffs have arrived. As is tradition on this channel and even in my earlier channels back during my childhood, I will give my predictions every step of the way. A few days ago, I released my play-in predictions and they did not go so well. I think most people were shocked by how things panned out, and this is nothing to be ashamed of. I love seeing upsets. I love watching great basketball games. That's what the postseason is all about. Anyways, before we get started with my predictions, please like the video. It helps me out way more than you guys realize. As is tradition, we will start with the Eastern Conference. Number 1 Miami Heat versus the number 8 Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks swooped into the playoffs in convincing fashion, blowing out the Hornets, then crushing the souls of the Cavaliers in a close one. Both the Heat and Hawks excel at shooting the long ball, each ranking in the top 10 in the league in efficiency from deep. But when it comes to defense, Atlanta is one of the worst at defending the perimeter. Miami, meanwhile, is one of the best. On the other hand, though, Atlanta does a very good job forcing turnovers. Miami struggles with avoiding turnovers. Atlanta is without big man Clint Capella for possibly a few games here due to a self-inflicted injury against the Cavs. And John Collins is questionable in this series. So even though Miami struggles with protecting the rim, I am not sure if the Hawks are going to be able to take advantage of this. Tyler Hero has been one of Miami's most important offensive players this season. And Jimmy Butler has been one of their most important players defensively. Both, as of right now, are healthy. Trae Young is going to be a shot launcher for the Hawks. They need him to make these shots. I'm not sure if he can do this consistently enough though. But, even though I was just ripping on the Hawks a lot there, I am going to go ahead and predict the Hawks winning this series in 6 games. Number 2, Boston Celtics versus number 7, Brooklyn Nets. This is without a doubt mainstream media's favorite first round pairing. The Celtics finished the season on an absolute tear, but unfortunately lost one of their most important pieces right before the end of the season in Robert Williams, a guy who is fighting for a Defensive Player of the Year nomination. But it is important to note that even with Williams healthy, the Celtics' rim defense ranks close to the bottom of the league. So without him, they are going to have problems inside. Brooklyn shoots about 24% of their shots at the rim, which is just about average in the league. And they only make about 65% of their looks, which is well below average. So look for them to try to attack this weakness and inevitably draw more fouls, which of course, they tend to draw a lot of fouls. Boston is a good team when it comes to avoiding fouls, but the increased need of players to help against drives could be bad for them. Both teams are led by 2 scorers who do most of their work around the perimeter by creating their own looks. These are Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown for the Celtics, and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving for the Nets. Any game, one or more of these guys could go off for 40 or more points, so expect some big nights with some big headlines. I do worry about Kyrie's health throughout this series. I know it is very pessimistic sounding, but Irving has shown to be frail year in and year out. He has played in less than half of the available playoff games he could have over the past 4 years. And he is not vaccinated, so he unfortunately has a pretty high risk of missing games going forward here. And I know this sounds kind of pessimistic, but I'm expecting him to miss games eventually. Give me the Boston Celtics winning this series in 7. Number 3, Milwaukee Bucks versus number 6, Chicago Bulls. I think everyone is expecting this series to go a certain way, but I will still dive into the teams and give a little bit of some things to watch. Chicago is without their best defensive player and one of their best passers, Lonzo Ball. This is a huge loss for them, but thankfully they have Alex Caruso, who does pretty much the same things, just not quite as well. Especially without Ball, the Bulls' biggest weakness is the amount of open threes they surrender. But it is important to note that Milwaukee doesn't really shoot a lot of threes, so the fact that Chicago forces threes could be a benefit actually when you think about it, because Giannis isn't necessarily very good at shooting them. Giannis Antetokounmpo likes to attack the rim, and though Nikola Vucevic is not a great rim protector, you may be surprised to hear this, but Chicago actually does have one of the better rim protecting defenses in the entire league. Guys like Patrick Williams, Derrick Jones Jr., Tony Bradley, and Vucevic are who to thank for this. But let's come back down to earth. Chicago has gone very cold at the end of the season. Milwaukee is the exact opposite. Thanks to the return of Brook Lopez, Drew Holiday's sharp playing, Chris Middleton's sharp playing, Grayson Allen's great shooting, newcomer Javon Carter is a three-point master, plus the Bulls do not have a good defensive piece to match up against Giannis. He will score or draw fouls on anybody. Now, I do not mean to discredit guys like DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. They can definitely go off and have some great games, but at best, those two guys can maybe steal one game. I'm going to go ahead and give this series to the Bucks in 5. Number 4, Philadelphia 76ers versus number 5, Toronto Raptors. This right here is one of my personal favorites in the first round because of the fact that Philly is apparently all in after they made their James Harden trade, and Toronto is really stinking good even though no one expected them to be. The first thing that needs to be said is that Joel Embiid is in his prime and healthy. This year cannot be taken for granted by the Philly faithful. James Harden looks much older than he actually is, and his scoring numbers have fallen off a cliff. But we know what he can do. Philly's biggest strengths are their ability to draw fouls, with Embiid and Harden ranking both first and third in the NBA in attempts per game respectively, and everyone knows this. But fouls are also really hard to come by in the playoffs. Another advantage in favor of the Sixers is Toronto's lackluster rim defense. Though the Raptors do have a very good floor defense, thanks to their plethora of long, athletic guys, the problem is they don't really have any 7-footers on their roster, especially nobody who can guard the monster that is Embiid. When your best bet against Embiid is a 6'9", 200-pound Chris Boucher, you're gonna have problems inside. Now, in Toronto's favor, I've already mentioned their elite perimeter defense. The Raptors actually force the most turnovers per possession in the entire NBA. Harden was second in the league in turnovers per game, and Embiid was 12th. Those are issues the Sixers are going to have to deal with. The Raptors are also much more well-rounded and deep compared to the Sixers. Though they don't have big-name guys, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, Chris Boucher, and of course Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. are all very good players who can score a ton. Also, I need to mention that Matisse Thybulle for the Sixers is an anti-vaxxer. Therefore, not only is there a risk of him missing games due to getting sick, he also cannot legally go into Canada and play any away games for the Sixers, which is a huge blow to the Sixers defense. He's one of their first 5 and one of their best 5. With all things considered, even though the Sixers should win the series if everything goes their way, I don't think it's going to go their way. Give me a very competitive 6 games and the Toronto Raptors pulling off an upset. Moving to the West, number 1 Phoenix Suns versus number 8 New Orleans Pelicans. The Suns have a tough one in round 1. They may have had the best record in the entire NBA by a long shot, but the Pelicans are not a pushover. After completing the CJ McCollum trade at the deadline, the Pelicans really began to look like a playoff team. They are led by McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Jonas Valanciunas. All 3 of those guys are borderline all-stars. They also all really do a good job at attacking the rim, which is why the Pelicans rank towards the top of the league in free throw attempts per game. Phoenix, meanwhile, counters this by defending inside and out exceptionally well. The Suns force turnovers, do a really good job at not fouling, and they play at a very fast pace, which forces a lot of other errors on the opposing team's part. Chris Paul is in year 16, and though he is without a doubt a Hall of Famer, he is hungry for his first championship. Devin Booker may be young and relatively inexperienced in playoff action, but he led the Suns to the finals last year in his very first appearance. He wants to finish the job this year. And DeAndre Ayton is looking to do something not done since Tim Duncan back in the 90s. That being win a championship as a number 1 overall pick within your first 4 years in the league. Sometimes teams who are such heavy favorites let their foot off the gas as they look ahead a little bit too much, but I don't see the Suns doing this as they didn't do that all season long. I have the Suns winning this series in 4 games. Number 2, Memphis Grizzlies versus number 7, Minnesota Timberwolves. The Wolves impressed me majorly by taking down a healthy LA Clippers team in the play-in. Literally nobody I searched on YouTube predicted that happening. All season long, I have been very pleasantly surprised by how well Anthony Edwards has played alongside his superstar teammate Karl Anthony Towns and fellow borderline all-star D'Angelo Russell in this tough Western Conference. Both the Grizz and Wolves thrive by attacking the rim and drawing fouls, while also each team struggles at protecting the rim, so I expect a lot of dunks and fouls throughout this series. These squads are both very young and hungry to prove they are more than just a young regular season hero team. Most people, both in the worlds of mainstream media and YouTube, expect neither team to get out of the second round, which I think is a little too harsh. Sure, neither of these squads have done it before, but most of these guys were not even in the NBA several years ago. The Suns just last year went from a decade of lottery picks to the finals. Booker, Ayton, and Mikal Bridges went from zero experience to being conference champions. This could happen here to one of these two teams. The Grizzlies and the Timberwolves match up very evenly against one another. Ja Morant wants to solidify himself as a legitimate MVP candidate. D'Angelo Russell wants to prove his lone All-Star appearance wasn't a fluke. Desmond Bane wants to prove he is another bright young star of tomorrow. Anthony Edwards needs to prove he deserves the #1 overall selection over LaMelo Ball. Jaren Jackson Jr. is hungry to match Ayton, Luka, and Trey with playoff success. And Towns is ready to start being a playoff producer as he climbs the NBA superstar ladder. I expect a very fun and very hard-fought series. In the end though, give me the Grizzlies in 7. Number 3, Golden State Warriors versus number 6, Denver Nuggets. The Warriors are finally back in the playoffs after a 2-year absence. They were once the NBA's best team by a wide margin. Now, not so much. Meanwhile, the Nuggets have been without their number 2, Jamal Murray, and number 3, Michael Porter Jr. all season long. MVP candidate Nikola Jokic has willed them above the play-in to a legitimate playoff spot. Can he carry them past such a heavy favorite is the question. Golden State's best attributes are their long-range shooting and their absolute hounding defense around the perimeter. They rank in the top 10 in the league in forced turnovers, defending the 3, and not fouling, while also cleaning up the glass better than most. But they aren't perfect. They rely very heavily on the guard game. Their interior presence is lacking, and the Nuggets' combination of Jokic, Aaron Gordon, and a few other large body reserves could be an issue for the Warriors. They also really do not have an answer for Jokic, because even though the Warriors' best defensive player, Draymond Green, does a lot of things, he is, without a doubt, too small to bother Jokic. Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Jordan Poole are going to get a lot of shots off against the Nuggets' weak defense. And it's going to be really tough for the Warriors' barrage of scoring to be stopped. Because of this, I have to give the Warriors this series in 5. And for the final series, the number 4 Dallas Mavericks versus the number 5 Utah Jazz. This series prediction gets a big fat asterisk next to it because of the injury Luka Doncic sustained in the final game of the regular season. The worst possible thing that could have happened to the Mavericks happened. The best player in the series will be missing for a minimum of 1 game, but likely a couple. This gives the Jazz the opportunity of a lifetime to steal some games on the road. Everyone likes to rip on the Jazz. People love to hate on Rudy Gobert because he isn't afraid of showing his emotion. Gobert is one of the league's best rim protectors ever, and he is in his prime. Gobert is a shot-blocking, dunking machine that only helps the Jazz while on the floor, and the Mavericks do not have any other good centers to match up against him. But something you may find interesting is the Jazz actually rank towards the bottom of the league in opponent shooting efficiency at the rim. That may seem completely wrong, and I actually had to do a triple take to verify this, but it's true. It seems that other than Gobert, the Jazz are quite lackluster defensively this year. Plus, their point guards Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson, who were at one time some of the best in the league, have struggled this year. The Jazz rank high in turnovers per game, which is not good for the playoffs. The Mavericks, even without Luka, have solid perimeter players in Jalen Brunson and newcomer Spencer Dinwiddie. Both have shot the ball well this year, kept their turnovers low, and defended the perimeter very well. Donovan Mitchell is the decider early in this series. He could go off and carry the Jazz to some wins, or he could blend in and not make an impact. Either way, when Luka returns from injury, which he should, this series should be over. I have the Mavericks coming back and grinding this one out and winning it in 7 games. So there you have it, my first round predictions for the 2022 NBA playoffs. I apologize if you could hear my dog barking in the background. I tried to stop her, but she's obnoxious. Please let me know who you have winning down below each matchup. I love to have back and forths in the comments, so please don't be shy. Subscribe if you like NBA content. I have more predictions coming up, as well as a very big special video coming out very soon. I will see you all next time.